Today, I want to dive into an interesting discussion about indie filmmaking versus mainstream filmmaking. In this segment of the Cinema Courtroom show, we will be exploring the pros and cons of each approach, but with a twist. This is all to culminate to a case for independent filmmaking, because that's the kind of filmmaking that I stand for in the cinema industry, ladies and gentlemen. But there are both sides to the argument to be discussed here, or, worth discussing, because some just aren't. That I am going to cover, and then I'll conclude, spoiler alert, with why independent filmmaking has to succeed. So yeah, that's what I'm going to try and accomplish in the next few minutes of this podcast. The thing I admire the most about independent filmmaking is that it offers a huge level of creativity and artistic freedom that is limited by mainstream filmmaking studios, such as Disney or Warner Brothers. Also, the unlimited creative power and potential of becoming an indie filmmaker is what generates the most nuanced and caliber screenplays, since you have unlimited creative power at your disposal, right? And you get to enjoy the freedom of not having a studio, a big, executive level studio that is, interfere with your vision like Warner Brothers did with Zack Snyder and the Justice League. You are your own boss, essentially, which I find to be just rad. But more importantly, again, top tier filmmakers will have the opportunity to exhibit their top tier visions without having to have it greenlit by, again, an elite executive wiping their ass with money in the bathroom somewhere, Another pro for indie pictures is that independent filmmakers have the psychological drive to make the perfect motion pictures. Otherwise, if they make a bad one, they might not ever be allowed to create a movie for anyone ever again. Alright, cool. So let's put the benefits of independent filmmaking on the side for a moment. Let's play devil's advocate for the cons. Limited budget is an obvious drawback for independent filmmaking, because independent filmmakers often face financial constraints. Without the backing of major studios or investors, securing funding for production, and trust me guys, $100,000, if you want to make a decent movie, either you have to be very economical of it, or it's not even enough to create your vision. So if you want to create your full vision in full force, you may not even be able to do that because you have to secure funding. Not only that, but you have to market the movie as well. And not only marketing, but distribution can also be a daunting task. Limited budgets can result in compromises on, again, production values, equipment, and resources, which may affect the overall quality of the film. You could have a certain level of quality in your head, and then realize that because of the funding, it's going to be less, to put it simply. But I do really think that limited budget of independent filmmaking can be outweighed with the filmmaker having maybe the right amount of charisma and the perfect pitch deck plus a fabulous screenplay to boot. Because if I were a studio executive, I would look at a, caliber screenplay and I would throw my money at it, because good stories generate revenue. And the studios that notice this, like A24 with Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is actually an indie film, they're the ones that make the most money and win the most Oscars. So, yeah. But if that counteract, if you don't have, charisma or the perfect pitch deck or maybe not even the perfect screenplay, well, that's even better, because now filmmakers they'd have an incentive to become resourceful and innovative in their approach to filmmaking. And you know what? They're going to get the wake-up reminder that, listen, you need to create the best screenplay that you can, because That's pretty your mind. Your creative mind is the only resource you can use to your full advantage. Otherwise, you have to make do with what little you have. And filmmakers would be able to seek creative remedies, if they're a creative thinker, to production setbacks, leading to fresh new filmmaking techniques. For instance, if you guys heard of a filming technique called a oneer, where basically you film it all in one shot, it's very difficult to do, but there's no denying that it saves a lot of time in between takes, because if you do it all in one take and it's perfect, it's easy to edit. So we talked about the pros and cons for independent filmmaking. How about mainstream filmmaking? Well, for one, because I feel immeasurable disappointment to how mainstream filmmaking operates, especially in the cinema industry, which we talk about a lot here in the Cinema Courtroom. I am going to be very biased in how I talk about it, but for the sake of a balanced argument, I mean, mainstream filmmaking, I suppose, has access to a whole treasury of funds, which can lead to excellent computer-generated imagery, like we got to behold in Avatar: The Way of Water recently, directed by James Cameron, starring Zoe Saldana, yada yada yada. There is no way conceivable to man that an indie film would be capable of creating such stunning visuals. Mainstream filmmaking can also reach a wide audience that is beyond just film festivals and niche communities. Hey guys, I like, it reminds me, like, in my Discord server, we have people that are like, hey guys, I have a short film, it cost me like $50 to make, but please hit the like button. Like, mainstream filmmaking doesn't have to worry about that. And yeah, independent artists don't have that same luxury as mainstream filmmaking. Instead, they have to do everything from scratch. But here's something we have to take into strong consideration. We cannot ignore the fact that indie movies have the motivation to craft the best possible screenplay that they can, which comes from having a low budget. The thing is, when it comes to big studios like Disney, they can have the luxury of incorporating filler scenes and stretching the runtime of their movies without much concern. Like, even if a film like Star Wars: The Last Jedi doesn't resonate with people, they have separate money vaults to account for any box office losses. But for an indie filmmaker, it's a whole different story. Indie filmmakers don't have access to such abundant resources, which means that everything they do has to count in the end. And let's face it, only an idiot indie filmmaker would piss on the limited resources that they have. And that's why indie filmmakers often find themselves going over their scripts countless times, treating them like full novels before even starting the shooting process, because they can't just have, like, write a script within 5 months and then just say, okay, we're going to see if it lands or not. No. You're going to spend years and years and years for probably just a few pages of a script for a first draft, because they want it to be perfect. They don't have the budget to accommodate failure, unlike Disney, Warner Brothers, or Netflix. Every decision matters, because the success or failure of their film can determine an independent curator's future in the industry. It's like a one-shot opportunity, and if they miss it, it's game over. Becoming an indie filmmaker isn't just about pleasing a large crowd. These filmmakers have a vision that's burning inside them, a vision that they believe is so important that it deserves to be turned into a tangible product. Well, it's tangible when you have it, like, on a physical media. If you're streaming, it's technically not. Whatever. My point still stands here. The indie films we see are often authentic because they are a manifestation of that passionate drive of creating the very best content. It's like savoring a fresh home-cooked meal compared to the fast food experience of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. No disrespect intended to the MCU, of course. So if you're an indie filmmaker, it's not about seeking validation from the masses. I mean, sure, you do need to start doing that if you want to make it big in the industry, but initially it's all about pouring your heart and soul into your screenplay, believing that the world needs to experience your story. It's that unwavering passion that sets indie filmmakers apart and fuels the relentless pursuit of creating something truly remarkable. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, the essence of being an indie filmmaker, driven by an unwavering creative force and an unyielding motivation to craft the best motion picture possible. It's this passion that gives indie artists such a significant and influential role in the cinema industry as opposed to mainstream filmmaking. But remember, this is just my quote unquote Quentin Tarantino perspective. Now I want to hear from all of you. What are your insights, agreements, disagreements, questions, and thoughts on mainstream versus indie films? Share them with me in the comment section below, or reach out to us through our Twitter inbox at Cinema Courtroom. The links can be found in the description below.